Hi, I'm Lisa Entwistle, founder of Wealthy Living and host of Wealthy Living radio show. I help open-minded, big-hearted people connect to themselves, others, and the world around them, guiding them to live a wealthy life both personally and professionally. I have a variety of conversations with different professionals to discuss topics that cover our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. We discuss how our choices impact our work, our relationships, and our health, and then suggest ways to help you live a wealthy life. So the modern world of technology, we're in it, and some of us love it and some of us hate it. But the reality is it's here to stay, and it's having a huge impact on our social, our emotional, and our physiological well-being. Device use and being digitally connected is affecting everyone, and especially young people, our parents and child relationships and family dynamics. So is the digital connection that we're having leading us to less human connection? So it's a huge question, and so here to discuss how young people are using devices and how to help families incorporate technology safely and smartly into our lives so that we can ensure our kids are getting the very best that the internet and technology has to offer without succumbing to the many pitfalls of the digital and connected world. I have invited Martine Oglethorpe, Director of The Modern Parent, to chat with me today. So with a background in secondary education and masters in counselling, Martine is able to use her extensive professional experience in conjunction with the personal experience of raising 5 boys. Yes, I said that right, 5 boys, to give a realistic approach to parenting today. Martine is an accredited speaker with the Office of the eSafety Commissioner and has presented to numerous parent groups, schools and teachers around Australia. Regular workshops with young people also ensures that she has the most relevant perspective and up-to-date information on what it means to grow up today. So welcome, Martine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure. It's such a huge topic, and I'm sure so many people are really struggling with this world of modern technology. I know I do with my kids. I do with myself. I see, even online in social media groups, there are women, particularly in business, who are online often and are always saying, I need to take a digital break. I don't know how to do that. So I think it's a huge problem all round. But yeah, today let's focus more on how it's affecting the kids and how it's affecting families, and then maybe, what are the common concerns and challenges and what can we do moving forward to help parents and kids navigate this very modern technical world. So in your opinion, you've given so many talks over so many years, seen so many families do this in all different ways. And, you hear news stories where there's physical violence in homes now with parents trying to get their kids off devices. So it's getting a bad rap, but I'm sure that there's really good things about it as well.
Yeah.
So what are some of the main challenges and concerns you're seeing?
Well, I guess the main challenge for all of us is how do we make sure that our kids are getting the very best that the technology has to offer, whilst avoiding all of those pitfalls that we do hear about so often in the media, but also that we do experience both with ourselves and in our homes. There's obviously we hear about the cyberbullying and the sexting, of the grooming and gaming addictions and the predators, the pornography, all of those things which are alarming, and rightly so to parents. But we've also got obviously a lot of the benefits that the technology can offer the kids, and all of us. So there are benefits to connection and collaboration and creativity and to their learning and education and the opportunity. And so we need to be able to work out how do we then garner all of those great things for our young people whilst trying to minimise those risks. And so I guess a lot of it comes down to how do we remain in control of our device use, and that is not only the way we use it and how much time we spend with it and how we avoid the distractions of it, but also how do we ensure that we're having a good experience with it when we are using it? How do we ensure that our connections are positive, that our experiences are positive, that what we're consuming is helpful and not a hindrance to us, and all of those sorts of things. So there's obviously a whole gamut of things that are certainly concerning for us, but I guess it comes down to being mindful and conscious of how we use it, how we can make sure that it remains something that is in addition to our lives and not something that takes away.
Yeah, so true, and yet so difficult.
and certainly a challenge. I think we also have to remember, though, what it fundamentally means to be a parent and a child hasn't really changed, and we somehow think that this whole world also has to present us with a whole new way to parent. Now, obviously, there are certainly different challenges for us, but we also have to remember that when our kids are young, they're happy to be protected by us, and that is our role, is to protect them and keep them safe. And then as they get older, they want to get the skills and the thinking and the babies to go out and be independent members of society. And so we still have to allow them to do that. But like all parenting things, we have to give them those skills and give them those behaviours and give them that thinking so that when we can't be there, they can do that on their own. Now, obviously, it's a lot trickier with the digital world because there are so many extra elements that we're having to deal with that we didn't have to deal with when we were growing up, and obviously our parents didn't. So we certainly have to be tweaking our parenting. But we also have to realise that we still are a parent, and we still want to be able to make decisions that help our children, because these devices are very difficult for adults to regulate and control. So they're certainly difficult for young people. So we need to be there to help them with that.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I mean, it does go across all parenting. There's from, trying to get your kids to eat healthy, trying to involve your kids to be active, all different things that we do with parenting, getting them to do chores, just different stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, they all require, obviously, our ability to encourage that sort of behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think sometimes we get a bit scared of making rules around it because, we get all of those sorts of things. Well, everybody else has got this game, or everybody else is playing it, or everyone's on Snapchat. And, at the end of the day, we always, parents had that when we were young. Every other kid's allowed to catch the train to the city, all those sorts of things. And somewhere we have to work out what are our values as a family and what's going to work for us. And also looking at that individual child. How are they coping with their device use and their screen time? Is it having a positive impact on them? Or are they starting to slip into some of those, I guess, red flags that we want to prevent? Some of those alarmist, I guess, but those things that we hear about in the media where we've got kids staying up all night or not going to school. And, there are red flags that happen before we get to that stage. And I think as parents, we need to have the ability to step in to prevent those things from escalating. So
when you talk about red flags, what would you say some of the red flags to look at varying ages? Because some people would be... people have got kids that might be teenagers now or young adolescents, and it really wasn't a big part of their toddler world because they were that little bit older, whereas now it's a huge part of toddler world. So, what sort of ages are we looking at? What red flags are we looking for at what ages?
Well, I guess when our kids are young and they're starting out on the devices, this is a great time to make sure you try and get some good habits in place, because obviously our habits then become our behaviours. So while our kids are young and still fairly malleable, we want to try and really work hard at building in those good habits so that they remain in control of that device use. Now, a lot of that when we're young, it does come down to how much time they're using the screens and obviously what they're using, which we still have a lot of control over when our children are young. When our kids are in primary school, we still have a lot of that control. It might seem sometimes like we don't, but, generally speaking, we've still got a little bit of that control because, they're under our roof, that we're controlling the Wi-Fi, we're controlling all of those sorts of things. So when they're young, the flags, I guess, that we're looking out for are going from, say, a moan to come to the dinner table, just let me finish this game, just let me, finish watching this YouTube video. I'm just about to be the last man standing at Fortnite, don't pull me off now, which is, can be fair enough. So when it goes from just a little moan or to a full-blown tantrum or refusing to come to the dinner table, then obviously there's a red flag. If a child is losing sleep, they're staying up late, playing games or playing on devices, they're red flags. We don't want our children getting up in the middle of the night and having access to devices because that's only going to escalate. If they stop doing the things that they usually enjoyed, they usually enjoyed going out and shooting hoops with mates or taking the dog for a walk, all of those things. When those things start to slip, or schoolwork starts to slip, or they stop doing their chores, or whatever is important to you or them, then those are some of those red flags that we want to start trying to make sure that we get on top of before they become, behaviours that are a lot harder to change. The older our kids get, the harder those behaviours are to change. And, again, for older kids, we want to make sure that they're still doing the things that they always enjoyed. And their device use is certainly going to change as they get older and as our rules will have to change. But I also think we need to look at that, individual child and how they are coping. Are they coming away from the screens and being, moody and irritable and aggressive, or those sorts of things? Or are they happily being able to play for an hour and a half on a game and coming away and doing the things that they like to do as well and still, being how they always were?
Which is really hard to gauge a lot of the time, because some of the effects, I suppose, that are happening, some of them are short term that you might be able to see straight off a game. So their moods and the way that they're interacting or connecting with other people within the space. But some of them are maybe patterns that are being formed or long-term things. So, they might be able to cope in the short term, but is there possible things that by letting them have that amount of time on the devices regularly, even though they seem to be kind of coping, are we putting patterns in place and changing brain functions and teaching behaviours that are not necessarily going to have a good impact?
Yeah, and again, that's often really tricky for us to know. And I guess parenting, again, through the ages has been tricky for parents to understand what's going on in a teenage brain all along. Sometimes there have always been those kids that, you think they're okay and they're not, or vice versa. So, it's just one of those, again, those parenting things we have to deal with. But I think if we can do what we can to, keep communicating with our kids and all of those sorts of things and keep those lines of communication open. And I guess one way that I also encourage parents to, I guess, be in tune with how their kids are going and how they're faring with this stuff is to try and engage with them about the technology. And that's not to say they have to go and comment on all of their status updates or anything like that, because I probably won't be a big fan of that. But it's about
They'll probably delete the comment.
They probably will, yeah. And they'll be reminded that you're following them. So it's also about letting them know that you understand that this is part of their world, and trying not to build up that us versus them scenario, which happens a lot with parents when we make technology the bad guy. Because at the end of the day, it is an important part of many of our young people's world. So when and even though we might feel it sometimes and it's the bane of our existence and we just wish it would go away and we wish Fortnite would just be obsolete and all those sorts of things go through our mind, at the end of the day, this is the only world our children have known. And this is the world that we have handed them, in a tablet, in their back pocket. We have given them this world. So we can't expect them to have the cognitive and the emotional and social ability that it's often asking of them to do it by themselves. So we do need to, if we're going to hand this stuff over, we have to play a major role as well in how we teach them, how we think about it with them, how we discuss it with them, because they're often just not there yet in terms of their cognitive development, for example, to handle a lot of the stuff that we expect of them. For example, we might give them an app to play with that we think is fine. It might be, well, it was Musical.ly, it's now TikTok, where we're just asking a child to make up videos, in lip sync to videos and all those sorts of things, and they're creating their own little karaoke songs. And that might seem fairly harmless to most of us, but what we also know is that a lot of the young people who are playing in this space don't have the cognitive ability to know who may be watching what they're doing, who they may be talking to. How do I know this person is who they say they are? What do I do with this video when it turns up next year and I'm not so proud of it? And all of those sorts of things, which, our kids are just, and it's not because, they're naive or stupid, it's just because they're just not cognitively there yet to deal with a lot of what this world has to show them. So we have to be prepared to probably do more than what most of us are doing in terms of that involvement, so that they know that we get it. There's a lot of stuff that we don't love about it, but we know it's part of your world. We've allowed it to be part of your world. So we have to remain connected to you and to the technology as well to understand how we can best incorporate it into your life in a way that is helpful for you. And you know, when I've had things go wrong with kids where something's happened and they've got themselves into trouble, or they've spoken to the wrong person, or things have got out of hand, and I will say to that child, why did you think, you couldn't go to mum or dad? Why were they not someone you felt when you knew this was getting out of hand? And their response is always because they wouldn't understand. Their response is always because they wouldn't understand. They would tell me to shut it down and to turn off that game and to go outside and play, or make a billy cart like we did in our days, and and all of this stuff that we can certainly think that why don't you just shut it down and turn it? But it's not that easy for a child, and so we have to be also prepared to know that they're going to let them know that they will probably make mistakes with this stuff. Let them know that if they do, hopefully they're small ones that we can learn from. So it's about trying to, I guess, open up those lines of communication and let them know that this is a world that is often really hard to control. Even though that one's, we obviously said at the start we want that to be our aim, is to be in control of it. It can be very hard to control because lots of it is out of our control. But there is also a lot that we can control. So we want our kids to know that, they might need some help with that along the way.
So what I'm hearing is basically the idea of connecting with our children through a greater understanding and more empathy. Yeah. So instead of being sort of this battle of wills where it's us against them and the device against us and all of those things, instead to really make an effort as a parent to understand the games that they're playing, and not necessarily understand them with this negative mindset, but really understand what's great about it and talk to them about how cool's that, and I understand why you like this, or any of those things.
And it makes it a lot easier for us to set up boundaries around things that our kids think we have some understanding about. So if our kids think that all you want to do is just get me off Fortnite and you want to ruin my fun and you hate me having a good time, which is often what I hear from kids. They just hate Fortnite. They don't know anything about it, though. They don't know, or whatever game it is. It might have been, Minecraft, or, whatever it is that. And when I've had parents say the same thing, I don't know why they would want to waste so much time playing that. It's just time wasting. So I've often encouraged parents to, maybe have a go. I know you don't have to sit there and play with them every night, and they're probably not going to want you to sit there and play with them every night. Even look over their shoulder for half an hour and have a look at the game. Look at some of the skills that they might actually be developing playing that game. And I had this, with a father who wanted his son to get off Minecraft. Couldn't wait for him to get off it because he just didn't understand it. So I said, have a go. He did have a go, and he ended up thinking, wow, there's actually some pretty good skills.
And then he got addicted.
And he didn't want to play with him every night, but occasionally they did. And he also said it was actually a good bonding thing for them. But it also allowed him to make some rules around it, because he was able to say, okay, I get why you like it, and there's a lot of fun to be had. And yes, you're developing some skills here, and you're connecting with friends and doing all those things. But it can't be the only way that you're entertained and are learning and all of those sorts of things. So we need to make sure that you have enough time to do all the other things that I want you to fit into your day, so that it becomes one element of what you do. So it just allows, I think, us to make some of those boundaries more easily, and it allows them to be accepted a bit more readily. Not always, obviously, but it does allow it if it's coming from a place of understanding and some perspective, because, as I say, most of us don't have a lot of perspective on it because it's not something that we grew up with. And for kids, these devices they answer a lot of those perceived needs that they have. They entertain them, they inform them, they socialise them, they connect them. So for a child, why would you put that down? It's doing a lot of things that they think that they need, and they don't have to move far, and it's engaging, and it makes sound, and it's colourful, and it does all those great things. So as parents, we have to work a lot harder to show them that they have other needs that need to be met in other ways, and that whilst that can be one way to learn and be entertained and connect, it can't be the only way.
Okay, so the way that you made that sound from a child's perspective, it's like the best sales marketing pitch I've heard. But, it really does make you think, oh, wow, actually, they got a really good point there. And they are, so let's talk about maybe some of the negative of, obviously you've said about, the balance of other things that happen in their lives, but what on a physical and on emotional, a physiological, and a social level, I mean, if you're saying that it's hit social needs because all of these devices or these games are often about connecting with other people socially.
Yeah.
Fortnite's even hit the element of getting them to get up and dance.
Yeah.
With how many 50-odd different dances.
Yeah.
They're learning skills of building or moving or, just technical skills.
Yeah.
That all sounds really good. So where is the big problem here? Because I know that I don't like my kids playing it all the time, and I've obviously got my reasons, but you're convincing me maybe somewhat otherwise. But, every parent's really worried about this.
Yeah.
Well, not every, but most parents are really worried about this, really worried about the time they're on it, even the kids that they've got that are into sport and other things.
Yeah. Well, I guess what we have to look at is, and I often talk about this in terms of when parents say they're on it for too long, how much time, and I get that question all the time. How much time should my 6-year-old have? How much time should my 9-year-old, my 13-year-old, my 15-year-old? And that's a really difficult question to ask. So we need to get a little bit smarter with how we frame some of these questions as well. Instead of asking just simply how much time, what is my child missing out on with the time that they're using the device, and how is it affecting them, as an individual? And so, and what are they doing with that time? So rather than just simply how much time are they on the screen, well, is it having a positive effect on them? Are they missing out on things that they need to be doing? And individually, how are they coping with that? So obviously there are some negative elements that we want to obviously curb, and that's where we have to step in and become the parent, because there are as we said, there are some physiological things that happen when we pick up a device, and this happens to adults as well. So for a child, though, it makes it even harder to regulate that behaviour, especially when it's something that they've almost literally grown up with. So, when we get on a device, we have dopamine release because it feels good. It feels good to get to the next level of a game, or it feels good when we get lots of likes on our Instagram post, or we're connecting with others or seeing great photos of things we like. So we've got that dopamine. We've got that state of flow that we get into. I'm just about to create this amazing city in Minecraft, so I'm in the flow. Or I'm just in the middle of watching this video, or I'm just about to be the last man standing on Fortnite. So I'm in that state of flow. So you try and rip that device out of me, and you are going to have a tantrum on your hands. And also, we're never quite satisfied with what happens, because there's always somewhere else to go online, and that is changing our brains. We used to look at a book and we go from start to finish, back to front, and we could say end of the chapter I'll finish, end of the book I'll finish, end of the page I'll finish. Now we pick up a device and we can go all over the shop. We can read an email, then go and read that article, see if they've got a Facebook page, do my words with friends, go and then look at my Instagram page, go back to Facebook, see that this dress keeps coming up in my feed because I looked at it once and now I have to, see it in my advertising all the time. So I'll go and have a look at that. So there's just never an end.
So with this end, though, that isn't ending, what effect is that having for our outer lives, for our lives for the future, for our kids' lives for the future? Where's the negative impact for all?
Well, the negative impact is that when we answer that, one of those questions that I said, what are we missing out on? We are going to be missing out on other stuff that we need. We know that our children's needs are more than just what a device can offer them. And so I guess it's that regulating their behaviour and the distraction that the devices provide is certainly one element of too much time with the screen. So as they get older, they're obviously not doing some of the things that they need to be doing, whether that's schoolwork or whether that's, face-to-face interaction with their friends, or whether that's active time, going outside and being active, or whether that's just sitting and musing and being bored and thinking, because we know that that's when a lot of our creativity happens, and it can't happen while we're constantly being engaged with this device. Yeah. So we know that there are a lot of other needs that our kids meet. So whilst the devices for our kids answer a lot of their needs, we as a parent and as an adult know that there is so much more that they need. And so the danger of not letting them know that they have all these other needs is that they're missing out on stuff that they do need. We know that they need to be active. We know that they need to connect with others. We know that they need to be bored and have downtime. We know that they need lots of sleep. So we don't want them looking at these devices late at night. We know that they affect their sleep. So there's all those sorts of elements. And I guess there's also that the social and emotional stuff that can happen when we start to exist in a world that is not always very authentic, and it's not always, what we want for our kids in terms of who are we allowing to pass judgment on our children, and we don't want our kids relying on their likes and their comments to decide who they are, how self-worthy they are, their sense of self-esteem. All of that needs to come from other places as well. Sure, they can still post stuff on Instagram, and they can still enjoy the likes that they get and the interactions that they have, but we don't want that to be the only place that they receive feedback about who they are, because we know that oftentimes they don't really even know those people, or they might only know a handful out of the 300 friends that they've got. And so suddenly we're allowing a whole lot of strangers to make judgment on us, and we don't want that for our kids. We want them to know that who they are is more than those likes. And so that obviously can be another negative impact of them spending all of that time. But again, it's not something that they are born knowing, because they woke up, pretty much these devices have been handed to them at earlier and earlier ages, and so it becomes a very big part of their life very quickly. And we know that kids are getting on social media at younger ages, so it is becoming part of that, of how they interact and how they socialise. But unfortunately, it's also becoming a part of how they see themselves, in response to what other people say about themselves, but also who they're viewing as well, and who they're comparing themselves to. We've got social media influencers out there, and who their role is to look great or whatever it is, or to have lots of followers, and we don't really want our kids to also be thinking that this is always authentic. And look, some kids get it, some kids do get that, and they get that very well. But others not so much. And I think that also comes down to that sense of who they are, and having that strong confidence in that.
Oh my God, it's such a huge, huge topic with so many different areas that can be covered, isn't it? Because like when you talk about some of these games, and I think before, moving into the realm of the social media and the texting and the, I suppose, putting yourself and competing against others, or people having the ability to be inauthentic behind a screen and say whatever they like in whatever language they like and whatever tone doesn't come across. Yeah. And that's a huge whole element in itself. But even just looking at the gaming side, or, it doesn't have to be Fortnite or some of the huge games, but even as the toddlers, or the games that they're playing, and that continuous stimuli that's being presented, and then the instantaneous result or outcome that they're seeing, is that just affecting their ability? Is that affecting a generation's ability to stay focused? Is it affecting a generation's ability to have patience? Is it, all of those things, like you say, that they don't have time for boredom, and they hate being bored. We hated being bored, but they really hate being bored, because they're used to getting things instantaneously.
And I think so we were able to develop some skills to counter that boredom as well, because we had to. Yes. And I guess we don't have enough of the research yet to know some of the answers to those questions, but I guess we can pretty much say, that generally I would say, we're not having those not developing those skills as well to counteract that boredom. And yes, we're probably not having the ability to do, a lot of the things that we as young people were able to do, because we've got that instant gratification. So, our kids won't wait more than 5 minutes before they're texting us and saying, "Where are you?" Whereas we as kids, we'd hang around easily for half an hour before mum or dad turned up from wherever we were. So there's certainly changes that the technology is certainly, made on young people in their lives. Some of it for the better, but some of it obviously not so much. And I guess we have to accept that.
Yeah, that's my next question. Is that what we have to do?
And I do think we have to accept that. But I also think that for some of those things, even being mindful of trying to still incorporate or stop some of those changes from happening can help. I mean, obviously in schools now we're seeing a lot more focus on mindfulness and things like that, because they are wanting their kids to sit for a while and just, try and be in the moment. And we're recognising that that's a skill that we're probably losing. So we do have to try and, come up with other ways to make those things happen. And I think that, we're, moving into that age where people are realising, we're losing some of this stuff. How do we how do we get it back? And so that's just one example that I've seen in schools is bringing that mindfulness back in, or, having them do the colouring in and the drawing, all those sorts of things to try and realise that we don't need to be that stimulated all the time.
Yeah, I mean, even you read articles that some of the people out of San Fran that are designing these apps, or even employees of Google or different places like that, don't let their kids touch devices because they know too much about these effects.
And I guess most of the social medias and the games, they're made to keep us on. They're made to keep us connected, because the longer you stay on, the more connection happens, the more you share, the more and the more money they make. So, and they're often based on how gambling games work and things like that. They target those parts of the brain that want to keep us on and connected. So we are fighting an uphill battle, very much so. So we do, as I say, as parents, I do think we have to work a little bit harder to counter some of those negative aspects. And that means that we can't always just sit back and say, oh, kids of today, they just want to be on a screen and they don't want to go outside and kick a footy anymore. It's like, well, you actually are going to have to go out there and physically get out there with them, because it's very easy for us to shout out from one end of the house, go outside. But as we said, if these devices are answering all the needs that they think they have, we have to work a bit harder. And most kids, at the end of the day, they do want to do active things, or they do want to do other things. It's just that they get into these habits of just sitting down and having this device, which is just probably easier in some ways. But I think, I do think for parents, we have to realise what we've given them, and therefore make that extra effort. Well, you know what, we're actually going out, and we're all going to go out and shoot some peeps, go for a bike ride, go for a walk, and we don't bring our devices, all those sorts of things. And really that has to be built in as early as you possibly can. So that's why I love talking to playgroups and kinders and young primary parents who sometimes go, I don't know if this is relevant to me. I said, it's absolutely relevant, because the earlier you can start building in some good habits into your family, the easier time you're going to have, because it's just going to be part of what your family does. That, they don't have to have the devices to answer every need. They have a lot of other stuff that they do, and it just becomes, part of what you do as a family. And all families, make rules around what they do, in their family life. So we can do it around technology as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's become really difficult to be a modern parent because what's asked of us is greater.
Huge.
I mean, it is greater in this realm, but, in having to be more involved, for me, it was like get home from school, drop your school bag, be home before dark. So your parents didn't have to. No. They took you from here, there to everywhere. They were great taxis, but they did, your family holidays, maybe family picnics on the weekend, but you didn't have to take them to necessarily shoot the hoops, because you did that with your mates down the street. You grabbed on your bikes and you'd go. Yeah. Whereas we've got to do more of that now, but not only do we have to do more of that, we're also often two-parent working families, often a lot of single-parent families now, all these additional tasks for parents to do. Yeah. And then we've actually got the added task that we've got to be a more present parent as well. Yeah. So it's tough.
It's very tough. It's very tough. And that's why I think, at the end of the day, it's not to say that we can't, hand an iPad over to our kid while we want to get the dinner done, or we want to have a coffee with our friend, and, we can still do all of those things. I think it's about being really mindful about the role that it plays. And that might also mean that, we look at how we're using it as well. And if somebody walks in the room, are we giving them our attention? Because we can tell our kids whatever we like, really, but at the end of the day, they're going to mirror a lot of what they see as well.
Totally.
So if we're using it in mindful ways, that's a great start, because I often have a lot of kids will also say, oh, Mum's always harping on about how much I use the device, but nobody's worse than she is. And that's a really common thing. I get that at least once in every student session when I talk about why Mum or Dad might be, telling you to get off your devices and why we need time to do other things. It's always a comment from a kid that Mum's on it more than anyone. And so I think we have to be mindful of how we're using it as well. And again, that's not to say we can't use it, because most of us will use it for our work, and it allows us to, for myself, it allows me to stay home and work from home and all those things. So it's a great addition in that way. But I also have to be conscious of how and when I'm using it. Am I answering the email while my child's trying to, read their reader to me, or am I being present in that moment with them? And so it's just about being mindful of those experiences well. But also, as you were saying before about how we want to, in our day, our parents would say, off you go at 4 o'clock, we'll see you at 7. We don't let our kids do that anymore either. So there is no way that most parents would allow their child to leave the house at 4 and just return 3 hours later. If they did, we'd probably give them a device so that we could monitor them, track them, or ring them and tell them to come back. So the world has definitely changed in that way. And I think, we're obviously a lot more fearful today in the way we parent as well, because we do have access to so much more information and we hear every single bad thing that goes on. And we also do that, with the digital world as well. We hear about every cyberbullying incident or every sexting or grooming incident and all those sorts of things. So it becomes a real fear for parents. So I think we also need to, be a little bit realistic as well in what we can manage with our kids. But I do think that building that culture of balance into your home and also having that open, connected conversation will go a long way, and role modelling. So I think those 3 things will, certainly put us in the best spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. When we do talk about parent responsibilities, let's look at that a little bit further because, is it the balance? Like, how do you get that balance right between kids self-regulating, parents, coming in and controlling, making the rules and going, this is how it is. You don't listen. I'm turning it off. I'm pulling it away. And, whose role is it in this? Is it the parents? Is it the kids? Is it the schools? Like, whose role is it to,
Yeah, I think we all want to play a part, obviously. And often this is a real thing between schools and parents because I also work in schools a lot and I hear about a lot of the issues that are presented to schools. And one of the things, obviously, is that a school will come to me and say, so we've had a lot of issues with group text messaging, somebody's been left out or somebody's been spoken about in a nasty way. Now there's six people are involved in this nasty group text message. And so I've got parents coming up to the school complaining about what's happening because they're reading the messages. So they're saying it's the school's responsibility because the girls are all or the boys are all from that school and they need to do something about it. And I've got the school saying, what are these children doing on their devices at 10:30 at night? This is the time that group chat happened. And the kids are saying, oh, well, it's there, so we used it when we chatted. And so it's certainly got to be, it revolves around everybody's responsibility, I think. But I think particularly when our kids are young, and as I said before, if we hand them these devices, we do have to be prepared to make the rules around it. And certainly we want to get to the place where they can self-regulate. Of course we do. But like all parenting decisions, sometimes they need help with that. So, for example, we might say, well, your child would love to have Coca-Cola for breakfast. Somewhere along the lines, we let them know that wasn't ever going to happen. So we made that as a rule. Now, if we had have let them say from the moment they were born that you can eat whatever you like, we're not going to have a very healthy child because they're going to go for the sugary drink for breakfast more than often than not. So we still are able to make decisions because we still have life experience and we still are, I guess, more wise than them in terms of what their needs are. So whilst we still want them to be able to self-regulate as they get older, we have to have some pretty firm boundaries to start with.
So talking about those firm boundaries, because for me, for example, relating it to the Coca-Cola situation or any food situation, it's definitely similar in that parents, make the rules and that's just the case and it's just accepted and it becomes a pattern. But also with food, I can just not buy Coca-Cola and I can just buy not junk food. It's not available to them. They don't have money at certain ages to go and buy it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen. But if devices are in the house and they're on them, it's not maybe as easy because it's there.
Yeah.
And then the battle starts to happen.
Yeah.
So as a parent who wants to feel like they have some control of this situation, what suggestions can you give to bring in boundaries without there necessarily being an escalated battle.
Yeah. And as I say, the earlier we start with this, the easier time we're going to have, because we're not then having to go back and change.
And if we haven't started early?
And if we haven't started early, I would say it's good to have those conversations away from the screen, so we don't decide that whilst they're in the middle of a game that we're going to start lecturing them on screen time and how bad it is for them and how they need to, curb their use in that, because you're not going to get the response that you want, and they're probably not going to be listening anyway. So I always say have those discussions at times away from the screens, and it can just be, I know that you like the screen, I know that you enjoy the game or whatever it is that you're playing or the device. However, there's a lot of other things that we need to fit into our day, and I also, as a parent, need to make sure that this is going to happen in a way that is healthy for you. Like I make lots of other decisions that are healthy for you. And these are some of as a parent, we still need to be able to come up with what works for us, because what works for different families is going to be different. We have some families that, they're okay with them having a couple of hours. Some won't have anything during the week. Some just want weekends. And I'm not going to come up and say, well, this is what should happen in every household. I think you need to work out, again, look at that individual child and how they're coping. Now, if they're not coping, then we have to come in with some ground rules. And as a parent, if it's a device that you are struggling to control with them, then it might be, well, we have to hand it in at 6 o'clock at night so that you have a couple of hours downtime before you go to bed, because you're not sleeping very well, or all those sorts of things, and I don't want you to have that, it's going to be too much of a distraction for you or too hard for you to regulate on your own at the moment, so I'll be taking it off. And that's okay for us to be able to say that. Or we don't have to necessarily turn the Wi-Fi off, but we can get extra... we can use the technology and use software and things like Family Zone, where we put it on and it just switches it off at certain times. And they will get used to it at the start. They, might, jump up and down, but usually once it's become something that they're used to, then they're going to be okay. And I think, we can't be afraid to make some of those rules. But again, it's looking at that individual child and what the effect is it's having on them, and how do you want it to look differently, and explaining that to them, but also making sure that you can have a little bit of input in terms of what do you think is fair, what do you think you need to have a good time on it, and still remain in control. And so when those things start to slip, we're going to have to relook at it and come up with some other ways. So it's about trying, and not easy. I've got 5 boys. It's not easy. But as I said, I've got boys that are different as well, in terms of each child has different needs with their technology, and each child has different, ways that they want to use it. And, and so I have different rules for different children, because I've seen some red flags in some that I didn't see in others. So I had to make sure that we curb that, and we don't get it right every time, and they still, have a tantrum at me sometimes and all those sorts of things. But that's just the difficulty of parenting today, and we have to face that it's not always going to be easy, and it's not going to be we're not going to get it right every time. Yeah. But I think it's sort of a battle that we have to keep going with if we want to avoid some of those, I guess, more alarmist situations that we hear about in the media that we don't want. But
so talking about the self-regulation brings me to maybe talking a little bit more about the safety aspect. So something like YouTube. Most kids are on YouTube. Yeah. Now YouTube basically, and even just the web, just generally, it gives, it has so much information out there. Yep. And YouTube will put down the side all the other videos that are related and all those sort of things. Now, most of the time, I'm not saying all kids, but generally their beginning video is generally quite innocent. They're there to watch the basketball shootouts, or they're there to watch the other kid playing Fortnite and all those things. How much self-regulation should we give them, or would be advised, on YouTube and the web generally? And how many safety, I don't know what it's called, but when you put safety, family safety devices.
Yes. Well, we have to not give, in terms of what they're going to be exposed to. Yeah. We can't put it all in their hands to regulate that and to make sure they're only watching stuff that's going to be helpful and safe for them, because there is so much stuff on the internet that is not made for children. And, the average age a child sees hardcore pornography is now 10. It used to be 11 when I started, doing this. So it's coming lower, and that's the average age. So we know that there are kids a lot younger being exposed to stuff that is, it's often violent, it's misogynistic, it's not a representation of relationships that we want for our kids. So there's that element, there's the violence, there's all those sorts of things, there's fake stuff, there's, all of the things that we don't want them to see. But also, YouTube is not regulated in any way, in that there's no classifications, there's no things. So it's not like a child's going to hear a warning at the start of a video saying, check with mum or dad before you do this dare, or there might be some nudity in this, maybe you don't want to turn it off if you're underage. We don't get that on YouTube. And so we do have to make sure we are putting in place, at the very least, that we're going to the settings buttons and making sure that we're turning on strict settings, so that we are avoiding the worst of the content. That's not to say that stuff doesn't get through, because it does. And that's what I say with every game, every social media, every search engine. We go to the settings button and we look at how can we make this as safe as possible with what we have. So the settings that are there, how do we make it as safe as possible? And then if we want to go that extra step, we will need to put on some sort of form of a software or something like, well, I use Family Zone because I know that it blocks out that content that I don't want, and it also blocks off the internet on the individual devices as well, without me having to turn off the Wi-Fi for the whole family. So we certainly can't allow young people, when they're surfing the net, to have that cognitive ability to say, hey, this isn't good for me. They just don't have it. And so we need to make sure that we've done what we can, because we're not going to be able to be there looking over their shoulder at every video that they watch. Obviously that's just not feasible. And they are, probably going to go to friends' houses and see stuff, or Big Brother's going to show them stuff that, so we also have to be prepared that they may see stuff that we don't want them to see.
Yeah,
because prepared to have those conversations.
Most of the time you can do what you like in the house, but they go and you can't control what other parents are doing.
No.
So the fact that they've all got these smart devices means that they're all connected all the time.
Yeah.
Which means that they can show their friends anything. So you can do all these safety things and then...
And they can still see things. And that's why I think, we can't... I think we do what we can.
Yeah.
Like everything, we do what we can. And then we have to also be prepared that things might go wrong, things might be seen, but letting our kids know, I guess, if you see stuff like this, I hope that you feel you can come to me because it might make you feel uncomfortable, or it might whatever it is that you're seeing, and being open about that as well, and letting them know that there is stuff online that's not made for young people.
That's more exciting for them.
And absolutely, because when kids are watching more YouTube videos now than they are watching television, and when we put them in front of television, it's pretty regulated. For a start, there's not a lot of content out there that they, is going to be too crazy for them. But we're generally putting them in front of stuff that's rated for them, or, it's generally true and all those sorts of things. We're not dealing with just anybody who wants to create something and put it online, which we are on a YouTube video. So we're dealing with a whole different, can of worms than our parents had to deal with when they stuck us in front of the TV. So
4 channels.
Yeah, 4 channels, and it was pretty regulated. And whereas now it's a whole different ball game, the YouTube videos. And again, some kids can sit there and just watch their basketball and watch all those sorts of things and use it fine. But there's always that chance that other stuff will sneak through. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to protect what we can.
So on your website, which I'll put the notes for the show notes, I'll put your website on there. Does it give information on different safety controls that parents can use? Yeah. So I have obviously going different blog posts, obviously outline different games and different settings and things like that. And there are general YouTube settings that they need to do, Safari settings that they need to do, all those sorts of things as a bare minimum. And then obviously you can go further and get your extra software and things like that to go on the devices themselves. And for me, that's more for that content stuff. They all certainly do extra things like, shut off Instagram at certain times or shut off the internet at certain times and all those sorts of things. But, it's also that content that's a big one, particularly for our younger kids that we want to prevent them from seeing. Yeah, great advice, and it's definitely something I need to, I think, get onto a little bit more. Before we finish up, I just want to talk briefly about something we briefly talked about off air, which was about self-worth. And I'm a true believer that everything in life for our well-being really comes back to our sense of self and our self-trust and our self-awareness and our worth. And I think that with all of this discussion, because it can get really confusing and overwhelming for parents, but I think if everybody can just at least have the takeaway that if we work really hard on kids' sense of self, then hopefully when they're using these devices, no matter what ways they're using them, that the impact is going to be less or less negative when they've got a strong sense of self. So maybe if you can just...
Yeah, absolutely. And look, because at the end of the day, if you've got a child that has a lot of other stuff going on in their life that they're focusing on, or they're very sure of who they are, or they're not relying on these external validations and things like that, then they're probably not going to get so wrapped up in those negative elements of certainly the social and emotional stuff that we talk about online, because they probably haven't got enough time for it, or they can allow stuff like that to just wash off their back much more so than others who don't. And those that's certainly the feedback that I get from kids. And when I talk to young people, the ones that are very sure of who they are, obviously don't have the same concerns of those that are not so sure. And obviously for girls and for boys, but obviously I think more so for girls, body image and all those things still play a huge role for young people. And so if that's already something that they're dealing with, well, putting them on Instagram is tricky for them, because you're obviously compounding a lot of those elements for them. Yeah. Whereas if there's somebody that's is all good with that, they're not comparing themselves to those people because they're okay in who they are. So certainly that's what we want to be working on for our kids, is and providing lots of different experiences that so that this isn't the only place that they get that validation, and lots of different communities that they're exposed to, or connections or role models and stuff away from the screens as well, being involved in their sporting clubs or their theatre groups or their youth groups, whatever it is, that provides that other feedback for them.
That's right.
And I think another way to really help our kids is to get them helping, get them volunteering in community, doing things like that. Because if we're doing stuff like that, we are realising that the world is bigger than me and my Instagram feed.
Right.
And that I can make a difference and be thanked for stuff of what I achieve and what I do and what I contribute to society or to people. And I think that can go a long way in helping that self-esteem and sense of self-worth if they've got, and that might be just getting them to help out with, if they play a basketball or netball or whatever, getting them to help out the coach of one of the younger levels, or getting them to run water for a team, or whatever it is, being part of something else that you're contributing to. You don't have to be the greatest sportsman ever, or you don't have to be the star of the show, but how else can you help or volunteer a community? Maybe starting up a GoFundMe page for koalas, which I've seen some young girls do, it was huge for them because that's where their focus was.
That's right.
Not on what was going on their feed. So it's trying to get those things right in the real world, because if we get all that right in the real world, we've got a lot better chance of things working out okay for them online.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I think that then it really comes down to, as parents, we do have limited energy. And I know myself that there are days that my energy in the interactions with children can be in the battle of getting them off the device.
Yeah.
But if I instead, which I do as well, but, just generally, and it's not about me, but just generally with parents, if you can put the energy into getting them to do more, like you said, things that are about caring and giving and generosity and community and connection, and things that are going to really instill that great sense of self in them, then the battles to get them off when they're playing, you might not feel you need to get them off as much, because you don't have the same, they're not presented with the same risk as when they're not when they don't have a good sense of self.
Definitely. Yeah.
So Like everything that I say with my Wealthy Living brand, it all comes back to connection to self, others, and the world around you.
Absolutely.
So I just want to end on something you said that I really like, and that's that you said we just, we can't get it right all the time, but we need to aim for maximum joy and minimum stress.
Yeah.
And that's just so simple, and I think that it makes it just sounds so much more achievable when it's just put like that.
Yeah, and we know that we are never going to be the perfect parent, and we're never going to have the perfect child, and we don't want that either. So we also want our kids to know that we're trying in this space, and we're going to do what we can, and we're going to stuff up sometimes. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're having the best time that we can, and avoiding those stressful and harmful situations that we often find ourselves in.
Yeah,
when we expect too much of each other.
Yeah, so good, so true. You're just a wealth of information on this topic. It's so good to talk to you because you're just so practical. You keep it really real, and unlike, I suppose, parents who we tend to sometimes get built up about all the negative of technology, but it's really good to look at it at a balanced view because, like I said at the beginning, whether you love it or you hate it, it's here to stay.
Yep.
And it's how we can navigate it in the best way so that we can, minimise those pitfalls and enhance, wellbeing opportunities and our life to become more connected, both online and offline. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Is there any? Oh, so good. So is there anything that I haven't covered that you feel that you want to just end with?
No, look, I think that's it. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be so many different elements that pop up for parents as their children reach different stages. And some might have a gaming child, some might have a child that loves their social media, all those sorts of things. But I think we need to just keep framing it in the same way, in that we do our best with our kids offline, and then it's usually going to translate well online. And again, staying involved though and connected. You don't have to find out every single place that they're hanging out or every single game that they're playing, but it's about having an interest and being aware of how they're using the technology and how it's affecting them. But if we're doing a good job offline, then it's usually going to translate well.
Brilliant. So how if parents are coming up with struggles or they're really struggling in this space, they may read blogs to help them, or they might read articles. But if they're really finding that they need extra help, do you do that? Do you do one-on-one work?
Yeah, I do
parents?
sometimes do some one-on-one work, and if they wanted to, get their schools to have some work, I work with students. I also do teacher professional development, and then obviously parent nights and things like that. That also allow for some ongoing stuff if parents are still struggling with stuff. And then I have webinars and things like that on the blog that they can check out as well.
So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Probably, you can go to the website, which is themodernparent.net. And I'm also and then I have a newsletter as well that they can sign up to on the website. And then I'm on Facebook as well at The Modern Parent. So I post, I guess, a lot of articles and things like that on there as well, and updates of what the tech's doing and how they can help.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And for those that are struggling with Fortnite, Martine wrote a fantastic article recently on Fortnite, so with a really balanced view, so you might want to check that out as well.
Yep, it's all on the blog.
All on the blog. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'm Lisa Entwistle, your host and founder of Wealthy Living. To find out more about my services, you can connect with me online at wealthyliving.com.au, wealthyliving, wellthy.com.au. I'm an integrated I can't even speak today, can I? I'm an integrative life, clarity and wellbeing coach, workplace wellness consultant, event facilitator and host. I hope you've really enjoyed the episode, that you've got loads out of it. And if you've got any further questions or any further comments to contribute to the conversation, please do get in touch, write a comment on the page, or you can rate it on iTunes if that's what you're watching on. Thank you so much, and thank you again, Martine, and I look forward to connecting soon.